How's it going? My name is James Mayo. I'm here talking on behalf of 8 Circuit Studios. We're a small development company. We're about 15 folks. Started working about 2 years ago on blockchain development, making blockchains in games. You can follow me on Twitter just for kind of the random stuff. And then if you want to follow us on 8 Circuit Studios, you can kind of check out our daily progress for Project Genesis, which is our flagship title. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about how to bring some of the learnings that we had from our AAA experience into blockchain game development. What you're looking at here is the flagship title that we got, Project Genesis. It's a blockchain-based game, heavily emphasizing sort of first-person shooter components mixed with it would be third-person space combat, and so we're kind of experimenting with a genre mashup. Now, we haven't seen a lot of these out there, but this is sort of our, as far as we think we can take things on the AAA front for the size team that we've got. So my background is actually in, let's see, I've worked at a couple of publishers, Nintendo, Microsoft. We worked as Microsoft transitioned from the PC industry into the console market. And I've worked on kind of both sides of the aisle. I worked as on the publishing side as well as the core game development side. So not only did we publish games earlier in my career, we were looking to get our games published as I moved to other companies. This title is going to be, let's see, I would say maybe August or so before we have our open alpha. But if you'd like, stop on by www.projectgenesis.com, sign up for the alpha. We'll get you in. So, full disclosure, I actually have not worked on any of these titles, but I think they're representative of AAA titles. But these are some of the titles that I have worked on. And then here's some of the titles that the team has participated in. So AAA, it's pretty, if you go onto like Wikipedia, it's a pretty nebulous description. Basically, it's big budget, it's big sales, presumably in there's like big teams. And I think they make some sort of equivalent to like film. So what I'd like to do is actually dive into AAA a little bit, hold up a magnifying glass, kind of break it down into perhaps some smaller, more digestible pieces. But I want to use Grand Theft Auto 5. I presume everybody here has at least heard of it. It's, I think, what I would say is at the upper end of AAA. And it's quite an incredible accomplishment, both in terms of what you can do technically with that particular engine, as well as like the experience that you would get as a player. So, I mean, I can't imagine packing much more content into a title. And they continue to update it and add content. So, the budget, depending on which article you read, it's $265 million, give or take $100 million. Some say that the extra 100 is going into marketing. Some say that it's included. And just as a comparison, since we were kind of talking about blockbuster films, the budget for GTA is actually higher than any one of these films that have been released. So that's a big number, $265 million. And the question is, like, what can you learn from that kind of money? Like, if you're spending that kind of money, you're effectively able to buy the best engineers, you're able to, or not necessarily buy them, but at least hire them, and then also do the same thing with artists, designers. And so, again, what could we possibly extract out of these types of environments that aren't just money-based? And I think when we started looking at some of these titles, what you do is you begin to sort of see that they're not just AAA as a title. In fact, if you go all the way back to the beginning of GTA, it was released October 21st, 1997, and it looked like this. I don't know if any of you guys have played GTA 1 at all, but this is your overhead 2D scroller. There's a little bit of parallaxing there to give kind of that 3D effect, but it's basically sprites. And but you will notice some of the consistent sort of thematic elements. You've got your cell phone, or maybe it was a pager at the time, but you would get updates on your missions that you were supposed to accomplish. You can jack cars, you can get in, get out, collect cars, smash stuff up, run over the occasional pedestrian. So, but this is an example of the AAA games that came out in 1997 as a comparative. We've got Final Fantasy VII, GoldenEye 007, Quake 2, and if you include the titles that were sort of at the beginning, with GTA, GTA, what are we at, 5? You're looking at Final Fantasy VII again. These are titles that sort of are at the upper end of their life cycle. In fact, there's a lot of history there. They're franchises. And that's probably a better way to think about what AAA is. It's sort of the culmination of a successful franchise. And so I think, how many folks here are indie developers or would consider themselves sort of indie or mid-core? Okay. Everybody else sort of just gamers, developers? Are they part of AAA or big publishers? Okay. Cool. Well, in the blockchain space, I would say that most of us would consider ourselves as more indie developer. And so we're kind of at the beginning of this journey, and how can we extract all the good stuff from people who have gone before? I like to actually think of us kind of in these two, sort of in this comparison as well, which is if you've got AAA franchises that are these giant tankers, they have a kind of momentum to them. Whereas as indies, we're a lot more nimble. And it's actually pretty interesting because in our space, it's probably more beneficial that we operate as sort of this Navy SEAL team Zodiac. We would, of course, love to have the capital, but I think we also chose this route because it's not as corporate. Corporations kind of can support the size of teams that are going to pull in the $265 million. And there's sort of a rigidity to them. They have a lot of structure, a lot of bureaucracy, and what I find is they're also quite afraid to take certain kinds of risks, especially when you're thinking about what the blockchain might mean. So what are some of the lessons that we can pull? Like I said, my background comes from AAA, and I think that I'm looking at about 40 titles that I've released, and so what that really means, it's not a brag, but what it means is that I've been through the development cycle a number of times, and so we sort of have it embedded into our muscle memory, into our DNA. And so with that, one of the things that we get a lot of experience on the AAA side is pitching, and you're pitching at a bunch of different levels. It's almost kind of meta, it's recursive, meaning you're oftentimes pitching a title, but you're also pitching your ideas within your organization. There's a lot of discussion that has to happen. But in our case, we got to have a lot of sort of both direct experience pitching and hearing pitches from developers, and we've also got a chance to sort of, with our friends in the industry, hear how these pitches go. On the developer side, we're also getting the opportunity to pitch big publishers. And one of the things that we sort of encountered was those pitches that had a demo actually did far better than those that didn't have a demo. And so what we got really good at is actually doing rapid prototyping. I don't know who was here yesterday who got a chance to listen to Christian Allen talk about his rapid prototyping experience, but I think like Dave was talking about, the show will be up at some point in the future. Yeah, you can check it out. But there's a lot of really great insights and lessons from that experience. So that's the first lesson we learned, is get really good at pitching, but get really, really good at developing rapid prototypes. And so you're making little vignettes, little experiences that highlight the concept or idea that you're trying to present. In addition to that, the second thing is this sort of rapid iteration process will help you find what's called the hook. And the hook, if we're looking at GTA as our example, in this case, there's kind of this concept of the pull and the hook. And so the pull is, something that gets people's attention, and the hook is what keeps it. And so in GTA's case, it was discovering that you could run over pedestrians. And that was sort of it got people's attention. And then the hook is this mechanic, this really tight loop, where you're getting a message, go on mission, you have the experience of jacking the car, you can collect these cars over time, complete the mission, get capital, but in the process, if you sort of make any mistakes along the way, there's the heightened sense of tension because you have to deal with the police, either because you've run over somebody or multiple people, or you've committed a crime in front of them. And so that was the hook, and that was kind of new at the time. We weren't seeing a lot of that with games. And so how does this relate to the blockchain? So we talked a bit about this sort of high frame rates, this rapid iteration. There's sort of two levels at which this helps you, this sort of this quick development process. The first one is it's going to help you find that hook that we just talked about, because there has to be a lot of exploration. But the second thing that happens when you're dealing with a high frame rate team is you get the benefit of sort of making a lot of mistakes quickly. I think in the Valley they call it failing fast. And so this allows you to fail fast, which is super important in the blockchain space. So from AAA, we sort of took this concept of rapid iteration, applied it to development with a blockchain, and we made a ton of mistakes. To start, we sort of thought you could just sprinkle the blockchain in your game. You actually can't do that. It's actually very challenging to work with blockchains because it's a particular kind of data model. So we developed at first our mobile title using React Native, and we had to create from scratch. Basically, it's like connective tissue. It's connect the game to the blockchain. We had to create a back-end system that allowed that to happen. Other games chose to go a different route. They chose to put most of their game logic on the blockchain. So who here is doing blockchain development? I think I recognize some of you guys. Okay. So this isn't a great description of what a blockchain is, but it's one that's useful for us, for those who haven't worked in the blockchain space. You can think of it like a database. You'll hear some people call it like a ledger. But in our experience, when we tried with our mobile title to put on what they call the digital assets or the non-fungible tokens on the blockchain, we encountered a bunch of we encountered a bunch of challenges in terms of transactions, and transactions are how you send information from one wallet to another wallet, or one asset to another wallet. And so through this process, we discovered that putting any logic on the blockchain incurred a pretty significant cost, because on blockchains, in order to transmit that information, they charge a little bit of a fee. But that fee can increase pretty rapidly depending on how much use the blockchain is getting. So that's it's partially technical, but what that meant was there was a lot of pain in dealing with blockchains. And so what you end up discovering is this problem that gets solved sort of in development generally, but it's basically like an input-output problem. It's what do you put on what technology? So as an example, if you need a high frame rate game, you have a GPU. This is your graphics card, and so that's what's cycling all of the information that comes up on your screen. We discovered that blockchains are better without any game logic on them. And so this is sort of like thinking about what do you put on your GPU, what do you put on your processor, what do you put on your hard drive. There are certain things you don't put on your hard drive. You don't use your hard drive as RAM, so use your hard drive instead to store data longer term. And it's the same thing with the blockchain. So that was sort of the first discovery that we made. And then the second was, for us, really trying to figure out what users valued, what was important to them. And in the blockchain space, there's a lot of emphasis on speculation or trading. And in games, it would be probably considered something like a secondary market. So if you're thinking about like baseball cards, if you think about Magic the Gathering in the real world, one of the things that makes these things kind of cool is this secondary market, which brings a kind of value to it. And so that's really big in the blockchain space typically. What we decided to do is actually move in a bit different direction. Because blockchains are pretty heavy freight for us to work with, we're deciding to put all game logic on the engine itself. And the engine that we're using is the Unreal Engine. And that allows us to do this rapid prototyping pretty quickly and then get product into folks' hands. The second thing that we learned, this was a hard lesson for us. It took us almost 2 years to come to this conclusion. This is a sort of a counter lesson. Because we come from the AAA space, we were actually trying to run marketing like a AAA company. And we're not quite that big, and we didn't have that capital, that kind of capital that you see AAA companies employ. But for us, we really tried the philosophy of hold a lot of things close to the vest, don't talk about your game very much, only release the most high polished stuff, focus on press first, and if you are familiar with marketing, there's sort of this funnel that goes from exposure and then goes down into engagement or conversion. So that's the philosophy that we went with. We said, hey, we got this great graphic. When we searched for it, we pulled it down, we used it. But we found that it wasn't getting us a lot of traction. And this is on me, but we kind of banged our head against the wall for quite a while until we realized that it's crucial to kind of flip that model around. We discovered that we can take advantage of the fact that we actually have a game, that we have something that we can put into folks' hands and let them see the sort of messiness of game development. And so we sort of inverted this model, emphasizing community first and sort of press, which is normally the first ones that you would typically engage. We are actually having them sort of at the end of the cycle for us. So community is actually paramount. We sort of just came to this conclusion recently. So you'll see us kind of shifting the way in which we're talking about Project Genesis. I would actually encourage you, if you guys are familiar with GDC, it's the Game Developers Conference. They have a ton of good information that comes out of there, and they sort of trickle out their videos as well. This talk by Jonas Patel is sort of the model that we're using for community development. It's brilliant. It's the Subnautica postmortem. And in his talk, what he discusses is using sort of this open kitchen model, as we've talked about, at 2 layers. And if you think about games as entertainment, you can think of this open kitchen model also as the development of your game as entertainment. And in fact, if you're going to go, you're working hard, spent 8 hours a day, you're looking to kind of decompress, maybe there's a game that's very similar to what you want to play. Just like maybe there's a type of food that you like to eat. It's fun to watch these shows as they teach you how to make this food or show you sort of unique elements to it. The same thing applies in game development. This is sort of a different layer of entertainment. So you can take advantage of the fact that it is messy, and as long as you're transparent and upfront with your community, they're along with you for the ride. And in fact, it really does this great thing of helping you just be authentic and honest with them. You can build trust. And then more importantly, at least from our perspective, in addition to showing folks how we're building games, it also is this extremely valuable resource for understanding the market upon which you'll be selling or to which you'll be selling. This community will help you understand what they value, and they will help guide your decisions. This is basically playtesting or market research for free. So this is a really incredible opportunity, and so I would encourage everybody who's interested in sort of working in development, just generally speaking, but certainly the blockchain industry, check this video out. Superb. So let's see. We'll keep it kind of high level. Did you guys have any other questions that I might be able to answer for you? We'll call that good right there. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah.
I can just check on it. Did you find through your community any research that you didn't expect? Something non-intuitive?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, we're still kind of working through it. So we released the game. We did a play test. We did a couple play tests. I think we're on our fourth. And by the fourth play test, there were 2 bits of information that came up. One person had said this is the game that they'd been looking for 10 years. And the other one had said this is the game that we've been looking for all our life. And so I wasn't expecting that because the game is in such an unfinished state. And we still haven't actually got to the bottom of that question. We'll need to dig into that a little bit. But my guess, if I was going to speculate, is that this particular game, I think it scratches the itch, if you guys are familiar with Star Citizen, sort of this big, epic, I think it's still being defined at this time, but it's a big, epic space game, and then, and it's taking quite a while to develop. I think we sort of scratch that itch right now because we can get folks in and playing in sort of this epic context. But then the other thing that we also offer is the first-person gameplay. And so these 2 things, I think, satisfy what Star Citizen might have projected that it was going to do.
Thank you. I think we'll move on from there. James, Mayo,
Right.
thank you very much indeed.
Cool. Thank you.